Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, Black leaders vowing to chart a movement of resistance. During last night's address to a joint session of Congress, President Trump said he's on the right track and will be forging ahead. DC's Black Lives Matter Plaza is heading into the history books, and Prince George's County voters are giving the state's attorney a path to the county executive seat. Now, those stories and much more are on deck as we sit at the Reporters Roundtable. My guests are Sonia Ross, founder of Black Women Unmuted, Brandon Tinsley, national politics reporter for Capital B News, and Hamil Harris, contributing writer for the Washington Informer. Thank you all so much for joining this conversation in a very, very busy news week. I appreciate your time.
No problem.
All right. Okay, so let us first talk about last night. We've got the president's State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress. And it's being called the longest address ever. More than 90 minutes, actually it was about 110 minutes, touting his first 40 days plus in office. Black leaders were also hosting a day-long State of the People address via live stream. I want to talk about the day. So I want to talk to you first, Sonia, about this State of the People address. This was really unprecedented in and of itself. 24 hours of blackity blackness, talking about all things political, social, economic. What were your thoughts about that? You've been doing this a little while.
Yeah, Harold, I had two thoughts about it. My first thought was hallelujah, because we should be talking about it. And we should be doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our own networks with where anybody can tune in at any time and listen to us, talk about us, and share our opinions about what we are up against in this nation as a people. And particularly useful, I think, is the fact that it was around the clock, because globally, anyone could tune in and catch what we had to say. My second thought about it was, oh my God, can we organize the thinking just a little bit so people can digest this wisdom that's being kicked around? You had to really sit there and focus for a long time to grasp the jewels of wisdom and all of the smart things that got said. So it would be nice to have that content busted up into usable segments that can get shared repeatedly on social media and in other news outlets. And I sincerely hope the organizers of this thing do that, so that this conversation doesn't just vanish into the ether. But it was a very good thing. It was a very useful thing. I saw several experts out there sharing the wisdom of things that they knew to have happened. A lot of things that I've seen go down myself in my years inside this beltway. And I was glad to see it.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, what was your opinion or your thoughts about this really unique presentation?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I really liked about it was the accessibility of it. That was one thing that we were talking about in my newsroom is there was an ability to sort of engage with it sort of on your own terms when you could tune in, as something that you could have on constantly, sort of come back to, re-engage with. And so that presentation to me, just like that format, I thought was really good. And also just the variety of people who were participating. And I think, this is what Sonia was also talking about. But you had people who were journalists, people who were former representatives. You had people who are local organizers. You had people who were involved with like research and think tanks. You had attorneys, but I think sort of the wealth of Black perspectives that were presented, I think was really key to making something that was really rich.
Mm-hmm. You know, Hamil, to Brandon's point, I watched it off and on during the course of the day. I mean, it was an entire day. It kind of reminded me of walking into a candy store where there were all kinds of flavors and kinds of things that you could take from it. You know, you had your gummy bears over here, and then you had your licorice over here. You had your hard candy here, and then you had your lemon heads and your candy bars. There was something there for everyone within the community.
It was, but the thing I asked the question, when you go to the candy store, what do you want? Do you want just some chocolate with nuts, or do you want a sandwich? And that the big ham hock sandwich was still at the State of the Union, but Trump up there said what he wanted to do. And the question is, was he challenged enough? Again, you saw Al Green walking out. We saw that. Now they want to censure him. We see the signs, and it was.
Well, hold on. Before we get to the state, before we get to the joint, yeah, let's go back to the candy store.
Okay,
because
it is good. It was good that we had a plethora. That's one of your words of voices, and that's good. But it's just a beginning, because again, what is the intent and the potency of this moment, the potency of this day? It has to go beyond just voices and everybody. I miss the old-fashioned radio time. That's like we're doing now, but I still, that impact. Will it have that impact like drive time has impact? Or those who want to have a taste of everything going on and all protests and stuff like that. It's just a lot. It still need more organization.
Well, and there's the first time, certainly, for everyone. Brandon, I was receiving notifications about this event from some journalism friends in other parts of the country. And one of the things that I will say again is that this appeared to offer something for everyone. But to Hamil's point, what do you think is the takeaway of that State of the People event?
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, the main takeaway is that there is a need. People are saying that there's a need to counter-programming need to what the administration, not only what the administration is saying, but also how the administration is being covered. I think we hear this a lot as Black people, as Black journalists, in terms of which sort of issues, how are issues being framed in media? How are they being related to the different communities they affect? And to me, the main takeaway, or at least one of them from this event, was really how do we sort of radically shake up the way that we present issues that affect Black people, that affect marginalized communities in a way that maybe we're probably not getting from, maybe legacy media organizations or places like that. And so it was sort of this idea that, like, if we can't rely on other newsrooms, other people, other experts to sort of give people the information that they need at a time when, Trump is going to give his address to Congress, how do we sort of fill that information gap? And to me, I think that was sort of the crux of the event.
Let me play this, and then we'll talk about this on the other side. And this is from the address to the joint session of Congress last night.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
That was Texas Congressman Al Green being removed after he stood up and was shouting at President Trump during the presentation. This is not the first time that we've seen something like this, Sonia, and it seems to be happening more and more. What are your thoughts about it?
Good for Al Green. Listen, there were two things happening with that address to Congress last night. There was the 47th President of the United States giving his take on the direction the shape the country is in and the direction that it's going. And then there was the normalization of the President of the United States, who is the most abnormal president of modern times. You cannot continue to engage in normalizing the abnormal and acting as if everything that we are witnessing here is not a direct assault on the democracy and the freedoms enshrined in the Constitution and what we hold dear in this country. So Congressman Green engaged in his First Amendment right to protest in that setting, and good for him. He should have. And, you know, all of this conversation about this was not what the Democrats approved in that setting is, okay, so he's wrong because he didn't follow the obedient line in normalizing this abnormal presidency. I say bravo for him. One thing we have to understand about Congressman Green is that he has consistently introduced a resolution to impeach the President of the United States for failure to adhere to his oath of office, for conduct inimical to this country. And that makes him heroic in terms of the stand he took. There were other members of the Congressional Black Caucus who did not participate, who were not there, who made their own statements about how they felt. There were some who walked out and believe that standing up there on that stage, looking at half of the Congress unwelcoming to him, was upsetting to the 47th President of the United States.
To a further point, one of the things that I find really interesting, because as I said, this isn't the first time we've seen this, Sonia. I'm sure you remember South Carolina Congressman Joe Wilson yelling at then President Barack Obama back in 2009. He was reprimanded because that was really kind of the first time that we had seen anything like that in modern times. Marjorie Taylor Greene, after Joe Wilson, in subsequent years, I should say, had done the same thing. She was never reprimanded. She was never censured. And so from your thought process, Sonia, is this where we are now? Has the decorum left and this is just where we are going forward now? Real quick before I take a break.
Well, do we always have to have decorum when the things that are at stake in this country are at stake here? Is really the question. So you're going to just march nicely into demise? Is that the way things go? MAGA hats are not allowed either on, as I recall, under the rules. Mm-hmm. But they were worn. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene was wearing one last night.
Yeah, we've seen them.
There was the attempt to drag the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky for his attire in the Oval Office, and doesn't he own a suit? Well, the 47th president of the United States pairs his suits with those MAGA hats. So, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, right?
Yeah.
And
hold that point.
It's no fun.
Hold that point. I've got to hold the point, please. I've got to take a really, really quick break. I'll let you finish, and we'll hear from Hamil as well as Brandon on the other side. Stay with us. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about some of the top stories of the week at the Reporters Roundtable. My guests are Sonia Ross, founder of Black Women Unmuted, Brandon Tinsley, national politics reporter for Capital B News, and Hamil Harris, contributing writer for the Washington Informer. I cut you off before the break. Sonia, finish your point, please.
The only point that I was making here is if you're going to engage in these sorts of behaviors in the Congress, in the halls of power in this country, you can't complain when others do it too. Mm-hmm. If it's sauce for you, it's sauce for them. I mean, come on. Reprimand Green if you want, but don't hold him to a standard that is different from what you've applied to your own.
Yeah, and that's the point I was making. They removed Al Green. They did not remove Joe Wilson. They did not remove Marjorie Taylor Greene. So certainly there is a question about how these quote offenders of decorum are treated based on perhaps who's in power. Go ahead, Hamil.
Another thing they did too. Now watch these carefully. Once Congressman Green was outside, the top Capitol officials, police, they were behind him like, you got to leave the building. It's not just leave the chamber. And I noticed that it's still different when we of color get arrested and how we're treated versus others who still are afforded the opportunity to sit in their seat like Joe Wilson, you lie, Mr. President, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all that. It's always a double standard. Also, it's still TV. And what they did when they had the little young 13-year-old African-American who was dressed like a police officer, and then they had the Secret Service giving him a badge and the little boy was hugging, and it was that kind of thing too. So I just think it's interesting as we protest or people protest, that how is it being played and portrayed? So again, you're right.
Yeah, a lot of theater, Brandon, last night.
Yeah, I think tons of theater. And, I think one thing I've been thinking about just, in my own work and future coverage is, last night really sort of provided a good way into thinking about, how our different Black political leaders sort of showing up at this particular political moment. What are they doing to sort of make their constituents' voices heard? And Sonia and Hamil were both talking about this, but it's like, some legislators were not in attendance, thinking that, that might have been more effective. Some were there, Representative Green, stood up and protested and was removed. But, what are the different ways that Black political leadership is really coming to this particular moment is something that last night really made clear to me. The fact that they're doing this in different ways, like you said, because of the different sort of the theater that was around the address, and sort of like, how is this theater in service of politics? Yes, but also in service of helping the communities legislators serve.
One other question, Brandon, and I'll start with you. We saw on the State of the People 24-hour streaming that Black leaders were promising to continue the resistance against the firing of federal workers, Donald Trump's attack on DEI. Do you think that can be done?
Ooh, $1 million question. I mean, one thing I've heard, even just sources, federal workers, former federal workers, people who have been laid off, have told me is that one thing they would like to see from their officials is how can you humanize what's happening right now, especially with the federal government? Trump's camp talks about it in terms of, this is a way to create greater efficiency in the federal government, or to get rid of red tape and bureaucracy and needless spending. But, people I have talked to through my own reporting, it's like, these are people's lives that are at stake here, their livelihoods. These are people who all of a sudden are professionally adrift because they do not have jobs, but they still have like bills that they need to pay. Some people I've been talking to, they're veterans. This is an administration that has really latched on to the narrative of patriotism and America first. People last night were chanting USA, USA, USA. And what about the veterans who are now getting kicked out of their jobs, who have been laid off? And so what I've been hearing, Harold, to your question about what can be done, is I've heard people say, like, why not do these kinds of mini town halls or sessions where you are bringing on people who have actually been affected by the dismantling of the federal service, and who can speak about what this means, how this actually impacts their lives. And that might be a way to sort of communicate maybe a more poignant message than sort of talking in abstract terms or things like that. But it's like, there are tons of people out there now who have been affected by this, and they're just like, bring us onto your air. Let us tell people from firsthand experience what the movements of this administration mean for us.
Sonia, there was some reporting earlier this week, or I believe over the weekend, on NBC News, and they were interviewing an organization that compiles this information. And in one of the graphs that I saw, even though Virginia has more federal government workers as residents than Maryland, Maryland has more affected. And that they are at the top of this, and I remember seeing at the top of the list, Maryland, and then Virginia, and then the rest. And to Brandon's point, it seems, for example, that Governor Wes Moore is trying to humanize the people who have been affected by these layoffs by saying, look, we've got 250 jobs, come and work in education. There's some at least 130,000 private industry jobs in Maryland, and we're going to try to wrap that up and connect everyone. And so on one hand, a governor is trying to do something, but again, it only seems like there's so much that can be done. Sonia.
I mean, the control of the narrative about what is unfolding is very, very important. So while there may be a population of people in the state of Maryland who are highly affected, and therefore the government, the implication there is Maryland will suffer more than Virginia will, right? Well, you don't know that, because the undercurrent under that is, well, a large number of the federal workforce is Black, and Prince George's County is super Black. Therefore, Maryland and all these Black government workers, it's going to be the Black people who suffer. You don't know that. Number one, that's number one. So painting a narrative that suggests something more must be done, something extra is going to happen because of the color of the people affected or impacted, is a central factor in whether the right responses get put together. And being a member of the informed member of the public is crucial. This is what every single citizen in this country needs to understand. You got to go and inform yourself well and not fall into the spin. The spin around the political story is winding up even faster now, because the current administration has to create the impression that they are succeeding in pulling off everything that they're trying to do, and that there is nothing anybody can do about it. That is hardly the case. There is plenty that can be done. Stop sitting up saying, what more can the Democrats do? And say, let me go out here and find out what the Democrats are doing. Because if people who will do that will find several states are stepping up. I mean, Wes Moore said what he said about hiring federal workers. Governor Hochul in New York said the same thing. So we're starting to see a trend here of states stepping in, using states' rights and state authority to blunt the federal actions. And do these MAGA operatives or anti-government forces truly want to start dismantling states' rights in order to carry out this agenda? Furthermore, you have to look at what's going on in the holistic sense, as in, what are the other branches of government doing, and stop defaulting to the notion that they have rolled over and handed all of their authority over to the executive branch. But there is just this crying need for people to believe that this stuff that's happening right now is working, and that absolutely nothing can be done about it, when that's just not the case. You can take what the Supreme Court did today and say, oh, okay, a line just got drawn in the sand, right? Where the Supreme Court told the current administration, no, you cannot take $1.2 billion, freeze $1.2 billion in U.S. aid to other countries and use it for whatever it is you want to use it for. Yeah. Now, that's a direct blow, is it not? So pay attention holistically to what is happening, and stop assuming that the damage is going to hit the way you're imagining that it will hit, because you're believing the spin.
So, Hamil, Sonia makes such an important point. And for those who are outside this conversation, regular working folks, what do you do about those low information people on all sides who just accept what they're hearing? We heard a lot of things that just were not true last night in the joint session address.
What they did, and I'm glad you asked me that question, is the image. Again, somebody's producing this. This is not just random stuff. When they showed all the women who had loved ones murdered because of illegal immigrants, and they just happened to have the Border Patrol guy in full uniform right in the gallery. So it's like you have the tearful, and it's tragic anybody dies, but you show this person, you got the Border Patrol guy, and now then Trump to the rescue. Every three voices, it was Trump to the rescue. It had a rhythm going. And so when you see those images, you get upset, and that's what they're doing. Where, like, when they took their time for Al Green to walk from the front, and when he had his stick up just like Charles Sumner, and then he got escorted out. That took 10 minutes to do all that. That's TV time. And what is appealing to people's raw emotions, they're the crooks, they're the fraud. And then when he went to the whole thing about somebody's 100 years old, and therefore, but we got to check for him. Then they said somebody's 120. Then he went on the way, somebody was, and lastly, someone's over 200 some odd years old, and they got it. So they take their time to produce something that's showing fraud, criminality, and abuse. And you have to plan that kind of stuff out if you want to have these made for TV moments that appeals to the folks that may not be Harvard scientists, but they see those images.
Yeah, but you don't have to be a Harvard scientist to get facts.
True, but would a fact make you tearful? Would a fact, again, because you're a journalist, but people that study this and work this for a living, they see these images and they see their, quote, president to the rescue or whatever. And, I mean, look at it. It's so sad. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who just got, quote, fired, let him go. And you saw those Joint Chiefs down there. You didn't see that 4-star African-American general this time. He did all these things, these executive orders, prior to State of the Union, as if he was planning a script to show what I've done in the first month of office. That was made for TV.
I do want to move on to another really critical issue, and a lot of this is happening hour by hour. Mayor Bowser, Muriel Bowser of the District of Columbia, says that she is going to be getting rid of Black Lives Matter Plaza, certainly the symbol of movement against police brutality, but even a bigger political symbol, and it's been there for many, many years. But now, Brandon, this is and we don't know this for sure, but certainly as the reporting is that the Trump administration is now pulling back on its threat, promise, call it what you want, to take over the district at the same time that the mayor says Black Lives Matter will soon be no more. Your thoughts about how Bowser is continuing to balance the difficulties of dealing with Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, from people I've spoken to, there's, I think it's a complicated relationship. I think with a lot of people in DC, the relationship with the mayor. On the one hand, she's in an incredibly difficult position of, being over a place like DC that in so many ways has been, over the decades, has been stripped of autonomy and power. And also there's always the racial undercurrent if you're talking about DC, Chocolate City. And then also, how do you work effectively?
Or mocha latte for those
nowadays.
For those of us who are from here and have been around, but please continue.
Yeah. But how do you balance out sort of like what you can do with what you want to do? And I think this goes back to, during COVID, there were a lot of people who were sort of frustrated with the way that Bowser handled aspects of COVID vaccine rollouts and things like that. And so I think a question that I've heard people ask is, if you are willing to sort of acquiesce to this, where does it stop? What else are you potentially willing to forfeit in order to appease this particular administration, or to, you think you're appeasing the administration, but, if it thinks that it can get away with this, then what's to say that it won't escalate, sort of what it's asking for. And so those are questions that I've heard people in the DMV area asking, even, as recently since yesterday with the removal of Black Lives Matter. And I think it's something that has people on edge, right? Because Trump has already made clear that he wants to challenge the Home Rule Act that DC has enjoyed for more than 50 years. And sort of what does it mean to take over a city that you have already impugned for, crime, and I can't invite these sorts of like world leaders here because of how dangerous it is. But then to dismantle the protections, the people, the ability of DC to really govern itself, and getting rid of people who actually want to do that work to help the city, to help the district's constituents. And so I think for a lot of people, it's nerve-wracking. I think the administration has made clear that it's looking for retribution in a way now that it wasn't in 2016. And sort of what does this mean for a place like DC and for a mayor like Bowser, who has already sort of like been a target of this administration in the past.
Mm-hmm. Sonia, your thoughts on the Muriel Bowser Donald Trump dilemma?
I suspect that he doesn't want that smoke from Muriel Bowser anymore. Number one, Mayor Bowser is very talented as a politician, and she knows when to hold them and when to fold them. She said, we have bigger issues to deal with right now than this. So what that said to me is she's playing poker. She's playing chess. She's playing chess poker. People tend to forget the origins of Black Lives Matter Plaza, because as the 45th president, Donald Trump wanted to call in the National Guard on citizen protesters in the park across from the White House and stick district taxpayers with the bill, and called in, I think, some National Guardsman from Utah or a different state, had a congressman call him in. And Muriel Bowser stood the line and said, I think you need to talk to the Secretary of the Army about paying this hotel bill where your National Guard troops are going to stay, because the district taxpayers won't be paying it. She effectively painted the words Black Lives Matter up the driveway to the White House, because that's what 16th Street does. It dead ends into the White House. And the president, the 45th president, had to see it every time he left the White House on a helicopter, or when he went to his window to close the drapes at night, he could see it lighted, illuminated on a building across the street. And he didn't mess with her anymore after that, you see. So as 47th president, there's probably a piece of him that wants to go back and tweak Muriel Bowser again, but he also understands he might be poking a bear. And so the question is, let's see what he does to come after Muriel Bowser again. The insinuation is, we'll come after your home rule. There's a threat implied in what's being said right here. And really all that did was show their cards to her, at which point she can plan accordingly. So I say, try not to read too much into what becomes of Black Lives Matter Plaza, but go look for the next thing that comes down between Muriel Bowser and Donald Trump, and then see who has the big joker in their hand at the time.
Okay. Real quick, Camille, go ahead.
There is an active plan. It was interesting to see Newt Gingrich in the thing yesterday in the Congress, and I remember how he and Eleanor Holmes Norton often talked and strategized a plan during the Bush administrations and things like that, the control board. And so it's not just, well, how we go up the next person, but what is the plan and the goal for the District of Columbia? And again, it's a lot going on. And she has her hands full in terms of what the district get. I don't know.
Let me quickly, in these last few minutes, let's talk about what's happening in Prince George's County, the special election. Sonia, you live in Prince George's, and I'll certainly start with you. County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy has the lead right now. Former County Executive Rashawn Baker in a distant second, according to the current vote count, and Councilmember Calvin Hawkins in third place, saying he will not, he's not conceding, at least not right now. But let's talk about kind of the big politics. Angela Alsobrooks supported Calvin Hawkins. Wes Moore supported Aisha Braveboy. We even saw last night Leslie Johnson, the wife of the former county executive Jack Johnson, who of course did serve time in federal prison for corruption. Your thoughts on this picture right now?
Who did the voters choose? It gets down to who the voters chose, whether they like it or not. And at some point, there's got to be function and not dysfunction in terms of the way that this county is run. There's a lot on the line for Prince George's County. I mean, it is the deal, for example, for the FBI headquarters still good? And what does that mean for the county? What's the relationship going to be between the federal government, the state government, and the county government in this area with the climate that we have right now? So this is not a time for schoolyard mud fights. Whoever the people choose is who you gotta work with. And whatever clique is empowered by this thing is just going to have to accept that their power did not get chosen by the people, or did get chosen by the people, and we're going to do what we got to do here. Aisha Braveboy did not endorse Angela Also Brooks for the Senate, as you probably gather.
Mm-hmm.
And she, in turn, did not endorse her. She did not endorse Braveboy, but Governor Westmore endorsed them both. There were other officials who endorsed them both. And realistically, there's something that can be done between these two powerful women to benefit Prince George's County. Prince George's County is still a font of Black wealth in America. I know the designation that got anointed onto Charles County in terms of a 51% Black majority, thereby making it the wealthiest Black majority county in the country. However, Prince George's County has more people. Prince George's County has a higher percentage or concentration of wealth. And so you have to think about it in those terms. It's a fight that's beyond just a little county outside of Washington, D.C., what's going to be done. And it's a major statement about the condition of Black political leadership. So at the core of it all, the people will decide it. Okay? Yeah. The people, who the people vote for is who you're going to get. So you just got to work with that.
But Camille, your thoughts about what's happening in Prince George's?
This is a fraction county. I've been in Prince George's County since I'm with the University of Maryland and left Florida, graduated Florida State. And Aisha Braveboy and also Brooks, they need to have a come to Jesus moment. They need Westmore. They need not the people, the politicians, because you got Calvin Hawkins. Again, he came out of Ward 7 and he was well known in the district. You have all these other people, Braveboy. And then you have Jolene Ivey. Many people supported her. And then she got out the race because her husband's the congressman. I mean, you got a lot of talent, but that talent is still not coalescing. And the schools have many problems. And people are very frustrated. So again, it's got to be more than just the people. I respect what you said, Sonia, but I just want to know, what are they going to do together? You know?
Interesting. Brandon, I'll let you have the last
word. About it, Hamil. That was my point about it. You got both of them have to listen to the people. The people have told you who you got to work with. So yes, you're right. They're going to have to go have a sisterly meeting behind closed doors, show a little D9 love to each other about how they get things done for the greater good.
Brandon, I was trying to find a Beyond the Gates reference, couldn't do it, but I'll let you have the last word, last 30 seconds.
I agree with Sonia and Hamil in that, like, I am curious to see if, one of the big things that criticisms that we often hear about Democratic leaders is sort of an inability to coalesce, an inability to sort of come together. This is one of those times where I think there's a lot of pressure for Democratic leadership to be able to realize that there are massive issues that they have to deal with sort of beyond sort of like the personal politics that might be between different candidates or different politicians. And so it's like, how do you actually come together to serve your constituents? And how do you come together to also think about the potentially larger issues that your state might be facing in the years ahead under this administration? And so I think I'm just really curious to see what Black leadership does going forward to sort of unify in service of the people in their state.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that'll be the last word. Sonia Ross, Brandon Tinsley, Hamil Harris, thank you all so much. We have lots to watch, and we will continue to keep our ear to the ground. Thank you again. That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, March 5th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.